Hey guys, tonight we begin with the slow-motion car crash that was the Great Depression. Grab your softest blanket, dim the lights to that cozy amber glow, and let's drift back to a time when everyone thought the party would never end. We're not here for the big dramatic crashes or the breadline photos. We're here for the quiet, weird ways a whole country learned to live smaller, sadder, and occasionally more inventive than it ever wanted to be. Settle in. This one's going to take a while. So picture it, 1929. The stock market is doing that thing where it looks like a rocket ship drawn by a toddler, straight up, no brakes. Everyone in on it. Your barber's got tips. Your milkman's leveraged to the eyebrows. The president, Herbert Hoover, is out there telling folks the economy is fundamentally sound, which is the kind of sentence that ages like milk in a sauna. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, October rolls around and the whole paper castle catches fire. The crash itself is boring in the way only numbers can be. Tuesday the 29th, 16 million shares change hands, which is a polite way of saying everyone tries to sell at once and there's no one left to buy. Prices don't drop, they evaporate. A guy who was worth 10 million on Monday is hunting couch cushions by Thursday. But we're not lingering on Wall Street. That place is loud. We're floating out to the suburbs, the farms, the little towns where the real quiet panic sets in. Let's start with a random family in, say, Toledo, Ohio. Call them the Millers. Dad worked at the Willys Overland plant cars, shiny ones, the kind people bought on credit because tomorrow was always going to be fatter than today. Plant closes in 30. Dad's 42, suddenly obsolete. Mom takes in laundry. The kids, 4 of them, stop asking for new shoes. They learn the difference between hungry and starving the way other kids learn multiplication tables. It's not cinematic. No one's fainting in the street. They just get thinner, quieter, better at pretending the potatoes are a full meal. Out in the countryside, it's worse because at least city folks can stand in lines. Farmers watch corn rot in the fields because the price fell below the cost of harvesting it. A bushel of wheat buys less than a candy bar, so they burn it for heat. Imagine that. Fields on fire at night, not for rebellion, just because it's warmer than selling. The government, in its infinite wisdom, pays some of them to plow crops under later on, keeps prices from collapsing further. Which means more burning, more plowing, more nothing. Hoover tries. He really does. He's an engineer by training, believes in voluntary cooperation, which sounds noble until you realize it's like asking a house fire to put itself out if everyone just agrees it's rude to burn. He sets up committees. The President's Organization on Unemployment Relief, POOUR. Even the acronym knows it's doomed. Local charities beg for donations with signs that say, "Give till it hurts," and then it hurts so much no one has anything left to give. By 1931, the phrase, "Brother, can you spare a dime?" is less a song lyric and more a national greeting. Hobos, real ones, not the romantic kind, ride the rails in numbers that make the railroads hire special police just to kick them off. They develop their own chalk code on fence posts. A circle with a dot means kind lady here. A jagged line means mean dog. It's the original Yelp, but for desperation. Banks start folding like cheap lawn chairs. You wake up, your life savings are a rumor. People line up anyway, because standing in line is free and hope is a muscle that atrophies slow. A guy in Detroit keeps his money in a sock after his bank eats the rest, sleeps with the sock under his pillow. His wife thinks he's having an affair with a laundered argyle. And the dust comes. Oh, the dust. We'll get to the Dust Bowl properly in a minute, but for now just know that the middle of the country starts coughing up its topsoil like a smoker hacking up a lung. Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, places that used to grow wheat taller than a child, turn into a beach without an ocean. Farmers wake up to find their windowsills drifted shut from the inside. Chickens suffocate in their coops. Kids wear wet rags over their faces to school, if school's still open. Hoover builds a town for the bonus army, World War vets who marched on Washington asking for their service bonuses early, because cash now beats a promise in 1945. He names the camp after him, Camp Hoover. Then he sends tanks to burn it down when they won't leave. The tanks are driven by a guy named MacArthur who will be famous later, and a guy named Eisenhower who will be president, and a guy named Patton who will be a headache. History is just future celebrities cosplaying competence. But let's not rush to FDR yet. That's the exciting part everyone remembers. We're still in the slow bleed. In Chicago, teachers haven't been paid in months. They keep showing up because what else are they going to do, and because the kids need the structure more than the lessons. One principal pawns his watch to buy coal for the furnace. The pawnbroker gives him half what it's worth and throws in a sympathetic shrug. People start measuring time in new ways. Since the crash becomes a calendar, birthdays get celebrated with a single extra egg in the pancake batter. Weddings are potluck now. The bride's family brings the chicken, the groom's brings the carrots, the priest hopes someone remembered salt. Divorce rates actually drop, not because love is stronger, but because no one can afford two households. And the radio, bless the radio, keeps playing like nothing's wrong. Amos N. Andy Crack jokes about streetcars while real streetcars fill with men riding nowhere to stay warm. Soap operas invent new ways for fictional rich people to suffer so the real poor can feel superior for 45 minutes. Franklin Roosevelt hasn't started his fireside chats yet, so the only voice in the ether belongs to advertisers telling you to buy a Frigidaire on time. Only $5 down, the rest when you're back on your feet, whenever that is. Kids invent games with the trash. Bottle caps are currency. A busted bicycle wheel becomes a hoop and a dream. In Harlem, rent parties start. You pay a quarter at the door, bring your own bottle, dance till dawn, and the host hopes the take covers the landlord. The music is incredible. Count Basie, Duke Ellington, they're not famous yet, just guys trying to eat. Every note is a small act of defiance against gravity. Out west, the Okies haven't started moving yet, but they're packing in their heads. A man stands on his porch at sunset, looks at land his granddaddy broke with a mule, and calculates how many miles to California on a tank of hope. His wife counts jars in the cellar, 23 quarts of peaches, 8 of tomatoes, 1 lonely beet. Enough to trade, maybe. Enough to bribe a border guard if California decides to secede from reality. In Washington, Hoover signs the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, which is a fancy way of telling the world, "We're hurting, so let's make sure you hurt too." Other countries retaliate. Global trade shrinks like a wool sweater in a hot wash. A wool sweater, by the way, is now a luxury. People unravel old ones to reknit socks with the toes darned twice. And still, life insists on happening. Bobbies are born in bedrooms with the windows sealed against dust. Old folks die quietly because the doctor stopped making house calls when the bills stopped getting paid. A boy in Alabama finds a nickel in a sewer grate and buys his sister a ribbon. She wears it until it frays to threads, then keeps the threads in a matchbox labeled Good Times. That's the texture we're after tonight. Not the headlines, the matchbox, the single beat, the teacher pawning his watch, the slow realization that tomorrow is just today with more dust on it. We're going to drift through this for hours, from the apple cellars on Fifth Avenue to the tar paper shacks in the San Joaquin Valley, from the bread lines that snake around blocks to the soup kitchens run by gangsters who figured out charity is good PR. So breathe slow. Let the names and dates blur like headlights in fog. We're not in a hurry. The Depression wasn't either. It took its sweet time teaching a whole generation how to want less, how to make do, how to smile with half a mouth when the photographer from the FSA shows up to document your dignity. Close your eyes if you want. I'll still be here, murmuring about foreclosed farms and makeshift toys, and the way a nation learned to whisper its prayers because shouting took too much energy. Let's float now to a little girl in West Virginia watching her father sharpen a knife on a whetstone that's mostly rust. He's not hunting. He's cutting the last leather belt into strips to fix the soles of her shoes. The knife slips. He doesn't curse. Just wraps his thumb in a rag that used to be a curtain and keeps going. She asks if Santa's coming this year. He says Santa's on relief too. She nods like that makes perfect sense. Kids adapt. It's the grown-ups who break. And on that cheerful note, let's keep drifting. Word count, 1,768. Part 2, when the land itself filed for bankruptcy. The Great Plains were supposed to be America's breadbasket, not its ashtray. But by 1932, the sky starts forgetting how to rain. Not a drought, exactly, drought's end. This is a new category of dry that settles in like a rude houseguest who eats your food and never leaves. Farmers who plowed up the buffalo grass decades earlier for wheat suddenly remember why the grass was there. It held the earth together. Without it, the soil turns traitor. Meet the Thomas family. out near Dalhart, Texas. Dad's name is actually Earl, but everyone calls him Dusty now, which is less a nickname and more a weather report. He's 35 going on 60, face like a topographic map of worry. Mom, Ruth, keeps a diary in the margins of a seed catalog because paper is for rich people. Their entries get shorter as the dust gets taller. April 14, black blizzard at 3 p.m. couldn't see the barn. Jackrabbit stew again. That's it. No exclamation points. Exclamation points are for people with futures. The storms have names now, the way hurricanes do later. Black Sunday, April 14, 1935, is the big one everyone remembers, but there are smaller ones every week, rolling in like slow brown tsunamis. You see it coming from miles away, a wall of darkness that eats the horizon. Smart folks close the windows, stuff rags under doors, hang wet sheets like sad curtains. Less smart folks stand outside and watch, because what else is there to do with awe when hope's on backorder? Inside, the dust finds every crack. It's in the sugar bowl, the baby's diapers, the pages of the Bible. Ruth finds grit between her teeth hours after brushing with baking soda. The kids develop dust pneumonia, which sounds made up but isn't. Lungs fill with Kansas. Doctors prescribe fresh air, which is the punchline of the century. Livestock starve standing up. Cows eat thistles because thistles are all that's left. A horse drops dead in the traces and Dusty just unhitches it, leaves the carcass for the buzzards, because burying takes a shovel and energy and both are in short supply. The buzzards get fat. Everything else gets thin. The government shows up eventually with men in ties who have never seen a callus. They take soil samples, nod sagely, tell Dusty to plant sorghum instead of wheat. Dusty wants to ask where he's supposed to get the seed, the plow, the rain, but the men are already in their Ford sedan kicking up more dust on the way to the next disaster. They leave behind a pamphlet, Erosion Control for Fun and Profit. Ruth uses it to start the cook stove. People start leaving, not all at once. First it's the bachelors, then the young couples, then anyone with a cousin in California who wrote a letter that said peaches. They load what fits in a Model T, mattress on top, kids in back, grandma riding shotgun with the chickens. The road west is Highway 66, and it becomes a river of jalopies pointed toward a rumor. Signs in Arizona say, Okies go home, which is rich coming from a state that's mostly stolen Mexican land, but logic isn't the point. Fear is. Back on the plains, the ones who stay develop rituals. You eat the jackrabbit before it eats your last cabbage. You save the coffee grounds 3 times. You tell the kids the dust is fairy powder and bedtime stories are about oceans they've never seen. At night, the wind howls like it's personally offended. Coyotes sound closer because there's nothing left to muffle them. FDR's in office now, and the New Deal is a phrase that means everything and nothing. The CCC plants trees nobody will live to sit under. The WPA pays artists to paint murals of happy farmers in overalls that nobody owns anymore. A photographer named Dorothea Lange takes a picture of a mother with her kids in a pea pickers camp. The mom's 32 but looks 50. The photo wins awards. The mom never sees a dime. Her name is Florence Thompson, and she's still picking peas when the war starts. In Washington, they argue about relief like it's a moral failing. Huey Long wants to make every family a king. Congress wants to make sure nobody gets ideas above their station. Meanwhile, a man in Arkansas trades his mule for a radio so his wife can hear soap operas. The mule dies of distemper. The radio works until the batteries give out. Then it's just a wooden box full of silence. Let's pause on a single image. A little boy in Guyman, Oklahoma, standing on a porch made of packing crates. He's holding a tin cup of water he carried from the well, which is mostly mud now. The sun is setting red through the dust, and for a minute the sky looks like the surface of Mars. He's supposed to bring the water inside for supper. But he stops to watch a tumbleweed the size of a Buick roll down the street like it owns the place. The tumbleweed wins. Everything else is negotiable. And still people plant. It's spring, sort of. The almanac says so. Dusty scratches furrows in the dirt with a broken bedspring because the plow's in the pawn shop. Ruth drops 6 precious seeds in each hole, covers them with dust that might as well be flour, whispers something that isn't quite a prayer. The seeds don't know they're supposed to fail. That's the thing about seeds. They're optimists. Night falls. The wind dies down to a mutter. Inside, the kerosene lamp hisses. Ruth reads to the kids from a library book with the covers torn off, Treasure Island, because pirates have food. The youngest falls asleep with his thumb in his mouth and dust in his eyelashes. Dusty sits on the porch steps, whittling a stick into nothing, listening to the quiet that isn't quiet because it's full of things unsaid. Somewhere a train whistle blows, heading west. Dusty doesn't look up. He's busy calculating how many more seasons of nothing a man can take before he becomes the nothing. The answer is more than you'd think. Let's keep floating. There's a widow in Boise City who knits scarves from binder twine. There's a preacher in Liberal, Kansas, who baptizes in mud. There's a girl in Beaver, Oklahoma, who writes letters to Eleanor Roosevelt on grocery sacks because paper is for weddings and funerals. Eleanor writes back sometimes. The letters are treasures. The grocery sacks are dinner. The land is teaching a master class in humility, and the tuition is everything you own. The cities never slept, but by 1933 they started napping in shifts. New York, Chicago, Detroit, places that used to pulse like over-caffeinated hearts, slow down to a murmur. The sidewalks are still crowded, but now it's with men in suits that went shiny at the elbows, women carrying signs that say, "We'll babysit for food." Kids selling apples because apples are portable and don't ask questions. Let's drift into Manhattan first, because if misery has a capital, it's where the tallest buildings cast the longest shadows. Picture a line outside a Salvation Army on the Bowery. It's 5 a.m., February, the kind of cold that forgets spring exists. The line is mostly men, but there are women too, and a few kids who learn to stand still before they learn to read. They shuffle forward one polite half-step at a time, like they're at a wedding reception nobody wanted to attend. Breath fogs, then freezes on mustaches. Someone coughs. The sound ricochets off brick walls like a marble in a tin can. At the front, a volunteer ladles bean soup into tin cups. The soup is mostly water with ambitions. A slice of bread comes with it, day-old, crust hard enough to use as a bookmark. The volunteer is a former stockbroker who lost everything but his cufflinks. He still wears them. They click softly against the ladle, a tiny metronome counting out survival. No one complains. Complaining costs energy, and energy is measured in spoonfuls now. A block away, a speakeasy-turned-soup kitchen is run by a guy named Dutch Schultz. Dutch figured out that feeding the hungry is good for optics when the feds are sniffing around your bootleg empire. His soup has meat, real meat, probably fallen off a truck. The catch: you eat it under a portrait of Dutch looking benevolent, like a mobster Santa. People eat. Dignity is a luxury, and the line for luxury is around a different block. Let's float south to a tenement in the Lower East Side. Mrs. Rossi, 48, widow, 5 kids, wakes at 4 to stand in the milk line. Milk is for the baby, technically, but the baby shares with the 4-year-old who shares with the 7-year-old who shares with Mrs. Rossi when no one's looking. The line is sponsored by the city, which means it's rationed and bureaucratic and still better than nothing. Mrs. Rossi practices her English on the way. 1 quart, please, thank you. She says it like a spell. The clerk nods, stamps a card, hands over a bottle with a nipple made from a finger of a rubber glove. Close enough. Back home, the kids sleep 3 to a mattress that used to be 2. The oldest, Angelo, is 14 and already has a job sweeping a bakery at 3 a.m. for stale rolls. He brings them home in his shirt because pockets are for people with futures. Mrs. Rossi slices the rolls thin, toasts them over a gas burner turned low to save pennies. Breakfast is toast and chicory coffee that tastes like regret. Angelo eats standing up, because sitting means you're done and he's not done yet. School is optional now. Not officially. Officially, it's compulsory. But teachers understand when a kid smells like coal smoke because he's been selling lumps door to door. The Board of Education cuts heat on Fridays to save money. Kids wear coats in class. The coats have holes where the elbows used to be. Pencils are communal. You sharpen both ends so 2 kids can write at once. Homework is whatever scrap paper mom wrapped the fish in. Over in Chicago, Al Capone opens a soup kitchen on South State Street. Feeds 400 a day. The newspapers love it. Capone poses with a ladle the size of a canoe paddle, grinning like he invented charity. The soup is good. Beef, carrots, actual potatoes. People line up at dawn. Capone's guys keep order with the gentle menace of baseball bats tucked under overcoats. No cutting. No seconds unless you're a kid. Kids get an extra roll and a pat on the head that feels like a blessing and a warning. Detroit is a ghost town with factories. Ford's River Rouge plant, once a cathedral of industry, lays off thousands. The gate is chained. A sign says "No help wanted" in letters big enough to read from the moon. Men stand outside anyway because standing is free. Some bring lunch pails out of habit. The pails are empty. They open them, look inside like maybe a sandwich grew there overnight, close them again. The ritual is important. A guy named Harry Bennett, Ford's enforcer with a face like a fist, recruits a private army to keep the unemployed from getting ideas. They call it the service department, which sounds friendlier than goon squad. In March 32, 5,000 march to the plant asking for jobs. Bennett's boys open fire. 4 dead, dozens wounded. The newspapers call it the Ford Massacre. Ford calls it Tuesday. But let's not linger on blood. We're here for the quiet disasters. Like the family in Hamtramck who eats oatmeal 3 times a day because oatmeal is cheap and sticks to the ribs. Mom adds water until it's more soup than porridge. Dad pretends he's full after 1 bowl. The kids don't notice. They're busy drawing cars on the back of unemployment forms. The cars have wings because wings are free. FDR's alphabet soup starts bubbling. CCC, WPA, PWA, initials like a secret code for hope. The Civilian Conservation Corps pays young men $25 a month to plant trees, build trails. Fight erosion with shovels and optimism. They send 20 home to the family. The other 5 buys cigarettes and the illusion of independence. A kid from Brooklyn named Salvator ships out to Idaho. He's never seen a mountain. The first letter home. The trees are taller than the tenements. I peed in a river. Mrs. Rossi cries over that letter for reasons she can't explain. The Works Progress Administration is weirder. Pays artists to paint, writers to write, actors to act. In Cleveland, a mural goes up in the post office showing happy workers building a brighter tomorrow. The workers are muscular and smiling. The real workers outside smoke hand-rolled cigarettes and wonder who the mural for. A playwright in New York writes a play about striking miners. It closes after 3 nights because the miners can't afford tickets. The playwright gets paid anyway. Irony is a growth industry. Harry Hopkins runs the whole circus from a desk piled with paper. He's skinny, chain smokes, talks like a machine gun on Valium, says, "People don't eat in the long run, they eat every day." Congress hates him because he spends money like it's going out of style, which it is. He sets up the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, hands cash to states with the gentle suggestion they maybe don't let children starve. Some states listen. Some build roads instead. Roads are forever, kids are temporary. In Harlem, they invent the rent party too. You pay 15 cents, bring a dish, dance to a piano player who hasn't eaten since Tuesday. The host hopes to make $5 to give the landlord. The landlord is a slumlord who owns half the block and lives in Westchester. The piano player is Fats Waller before he's famous. He plays Ain't Misbehavin', like it's a dare. People dance slow because fast takes calories. Churches pivot. St. Patrick's Cathedral opens a bread line that snakes around the block and into Rockefeller Center, which is half-built and looks like a skeleton in a top hat. Priests hand out communion wafers and real bread, no questions asked. A nun named Sister Irene keeps a ledger of miracles. Mrs. Cohen, 3 potatoes. Mr. Washington, shoes for the baby. The ledger is private. God doesn't need receipts. Kids develop radar for opportunity. A nickel for carrying groceries. A dime for shoveling coal. A quarter for not telling mom where the coal came from. In the Bronx, a boy named Izzy finds a crate of oranges behind a market. Rotten on one side, perfect on the other. He slices off the bad, sells the good for 2 cents a wedge. Buys his sister a haircut. She cries because it's the first time her hair's been cut by someone who is mom with kitchen scissors. Evictions are theater now. The marshal shows up with a truck. Neighbors form a bucket brigade in reverse, passing furniture back inside as fast as it's carried out. The marshal sighs, fills out paperwork, comes back tomorrow. It's a dance. Everyone knows the steps. The furniture is mostly orange crates and optimism anyway. And the radio, still the radio, becomes a lifeline. Jack Benny cracks jokes about being broke. Fibber McGee opens a closet that avalanches sound effects. The Lone Ranger rides again because justice is free if you imagine it hard enough. FDR finally speaks. March 12, 1933. First fireside chat. He explains banks like you'd explain gravity to a 5-year-old. You put your money in, it doesn't disappear, it just takes a nap. People listen clustered around sets powered by car batteries. A guy in Queens writes in the margin of his newspaper, "He talks like he knows my kitchen." The banks reopen. Some money comes back, not all, but enough to buy a stamp to write thank you. Let's linger on a single night in a walk-up in Pittsburgh. The Kowalski family, dad, mom, 3 kids, Uncle Stan who lost his job at the mill, sit around a table lit by one bulb. They're playing cards with a deck missing the 3 of hearts. The pot is matchsticks. Winner gets to choose tomorrow's dinner, beans or oatmeal. Dad lets the youngest win. The youngest chooses oatmeal because it's sweeter. Dad smiles like he's not calculating how many more cans of beans are in the pantry. Uncle Stan hums a polka under his breath. The bulb flickers. Nobody mentions it. Flickering is normal now. Outside, a streetcar clangs past, mostly empty. The conductor waves at a cop who waves back. 2 men with nothing left to protect, protecting the ritual anyway. Somewhere a baby cries, then stops, fed or given up, hard to tell. The city breathes slow, like it's practicing for sleep. We're not done with the cities yet. There's a librarian in Cincinnati who lets kids read in the warmth after closing. There's a doctor in St. Louis who trades appendectomies for chickens. There's a janitor in Philadelphia who sleeps in the boiler room because rent is a memory. But those are for later. For now, let the bread line dissolve into dawn. The soup pots cool. The ladles rest. The city exhales, and tomorrow the line forms again, a little shorter maybe, or longer. The numbers don't care about your bedtime story. Let's drift west now, to the Hoovervilles sprouting like mushrooms after a sad rain. Tar paper palaces with names like Prosperity Heights and Hard Luck City. We'll meet a mayor elected by hobos and a dog that guards a pot of perpetual stew. But that's after we check in on the Okies hitting California and discovering the Golden State has a locked gate. Breathe slow. The night's young and the despair is patient.